O think upon thy servant as concerning thy word, wherein thou hast caused me to put my trust. The same is my comfort in my trouble, for thy word hath quickened me. The proud have had me exceedingly in derision, yet I have not shrinked from thy law. For I remembered thine everlasting judgments, O Lord, and received comfort. I am horribly afraid for the ungodly that forsake thy law. Thy statutes have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage. I have thought upon thy name, O Lord, in the night season, and I have kept thy law. This I had, because I kept thy commandments. This is the word of the Lord. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night with you guys. I pray that you are all well. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you're still enjoying the Feast of the Nativity, and that you are looking forward to 2021 now that we're 1 month into it, and it is 11 months to go before 2022. So I hope you guys are, geared up, ready. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Virginia, iPhone, Baron, Solar, Trust, Marek, Ison, and Jane as the first people here. Just to let you know, I am in theory going to be joined by a Muslim who we're going to have a general discussion about Islam. I realise what I put in the title, so that title may need to be changed, just to let you know. But without further ado, I'll bring in the guy who says he doesn't want to be on camera. Man of God, how are you?
Hi, Bob. Can you hear me?
I'm all right, thanks be to God. How are you?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm all right, thanks be to God. I am right in assuming you're a Muslim, right?
I was actually. Yeah, I was.
You was or you are?
No, I was.
Are you still now?
No, I mentioned that to you with the first email.
Then, bro, I apologize. I'm gonna have to redo this. Me and you are gonna have to talk on another time. No, me and you are gonna have to talk on another time. I'm really sorry. I totally messed this up. I had you down in my head as a Muslim for a debate.
So you can debate me because I have some information you might be interested, and it might really help you with your debates in Speaker's Corner. That's why I contacted you.
That is so kind, and we definitely will talk. But not today on this stream. I'm really sorry. This is my bad. I messed this up. I own this mistake of mine. But we'll talk off camera, and then we might very well do a live stream in the future, you and me. But hang around if you want to, and then we'll because I might be opening this up to the audience, so you might be able to come back then. Is that all right? I do apologize. I'm sorry for the mix-up.
If the audience are asking questions as well, would you allow the audience to come in and ask questions, or
Yeah, we'll be doing that. I might be doing that. I might be doing that.
So I'll hang around and see if I can make some points.
Yeah. So I'm really sorry about that. I totally mixed you up with someone else. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to reschedule something that we can speak in private first and see if you're kind of making sense of my ideology about Islam and everything else that I believe in. Well, I still believe in God. I'm a man of God.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. Chef.
Okay, I'll let you do your chat, and I will stick around, and we'll talk some other time. And please make sure you just send me a message by email. I emailed you as well today.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Worries.
Sorry about the confusion. My bad.
No problem.
So that, guys, is exactly something that happens to me a lot, actually. Like, I end up having so many conversations that sort of permeate around the same topics that sometimes I get people confused. Now I'm wondering who it was that I was talking to about them coming on the show. It might have been someone else. Anyway, that's my bad. I totally messed that up. Never mind. this is what you do. This is what happens when you do just minutes worth of so, man of God, I'm just taking you out of the studio for a second, because what I'm going to do instead is a presentation, and then if there's time, I'll open it up to people to come in and talk. So, oh well, never mind. But that's what happens when you've only got, because I'm doing this part time. I've only got so much time to allot to everything, including admin. And yeah, so there's an example of why I need more time to be better organized. But that is not a problem, because what I would like to do today is return instead to the title, which is issues and problems connected to the Islamic concept of God. And it's connected to the way that God describes himself, because what I would contend is that Islamic theology basically collapses into nonsense, into babble when it's pressed, when it's examined. It doesn't have the same kind of deep thought that has gone into centuries worth of reflection that Christian theology has. That it essentially descends into a nihilistic attitude towards language, based upon the two doctrines that Muslims like to talk about the most. One is the utter absolute otherness of Allah, that he's not like anything in his creation, and the other is the fact that that Allah is a monad, that he is a singularity, that he is an absolute one without plurality. Now these two concepts are very central to Islamic theology, and when we start to examine the texts of Islam, we find that there are problems with regards to the way that the language describes Allah, and then what Muslims say in response to that. Certainly Muslims involved in dawah demonstrate that they know more, that they are guilty of what the Quran accuses Christians of doing, which is distorting the words of the book. So I just want to explain what I mean. When we see, for example, in Surah 2, Ayah 115, it says, the face of Allah. Now, it says, and to Allah belong the east and the west, so whenever you turn yourselves or your faces, there is the face of Allah. And he is high above his throne, that's in brackets. Surely Allah is all sufficient for his creatures' needs, all-knowing. And so that's in Surah 2, 115 by the Hilali Khan version. Again, we see in Surah 92, Ayah 20, using the Arbari version of the Quran, only seeking the face of his Lord, the Most High. Or so that begs the question, does Allah have a face, and what does it mean to speak of Allah having a face? Now, what's an important point to draw out here, guys, is that people like Zakir Naik and Ahmadidat, who are polemicists well known and famed and lauded within the Islamic world, attack the Bible for anthropomorphic and language that they say degrades God, and is not worthy language to be spoken of God. So it's talking about examples, for instance, where it says that God rests on the seventh day, or God rises like a drunk man out of sleep. Another sort of anthropomorphic languages and phrases. But yet we find exactly that kind of thing in the Quran. Now, if Allah has a face, then, we can ask the question, does he have a mouth on that face? Does he have a nose on that face? It says, for instance, in Surah 52, Ayah 48, and this is in the Yosef Ali version, of the Quran. Now await in patience the command of thy Lord, for verily thou art in our eyes, and celebrate the praises of thy Lord the while thou standest forth. So we have a face and we have eyes. It doesn't say how many. And so it begs the question, what other body parts are being described in Islamic literature? So in Surah 5, Ayah 64, it says, the Jews say God's hand is tied up. Now, personally, I've never seen any evidence of the Jews ever saying such a claim, so I'd like to see historical verification that the Jews have spoken this way about God, but that's what the Quran is putting into their mouth. Be their hands tied up, and be they accursed, for they utter. For they utter, that's how it's translated. Nay, both his hands are widely outstretched. He giveth and spendeth as he pleaseth. That's in reference to Allah. And you can find that, in, as I say, in Surah 5, Ayah 64. Now, we can see that Allah has two hands. Now, I have two hands. So, is that error? Is that statement in error? Does Allah have two hands, and do I have two hands? I mean, is two the same for me as it is the same for Allah? Does two mean the same? Does hands mean the same? Or, do I, the one who, writes letters and writes with my hands, have a similar number of hands to Allah? At what point does this idea of Allah's utter otherness break down into meaninglessness? Because if we're saying that he is utterly other, are we saying that the number two has existed platonically, eternally, because Allah has always had two hands? And if he has always had two hands, does that not mean that the number two has always existed eternally, or that numbers exist eternally? And thus does the language conferring about numbers also exist eternally? Where does this utter otherness end, and where does similitude begin? And what does it mean to say hands and face and eyes? A point that we'll come back to. The similitude grows stronger because obviously as you all do, that you all write with your hands, and yet we find in Bayan Talbis al-Jamia 153, it reads, and this is a hadith, it has been authentically reported by both Al-Bukhari and Muslim in their Sahihs, and I've not been able to find these hadiths just yet, that the Prophet said in the hadith of the intercession, which I've got to find, it will be said to Musa, you are Musa that Allah has specified with his direct speech to you and wrote the tablets for you with his hand. So Allah writes with his hand and I write with my hand. So did Allah write the Torah as the hadith say that he did? That's in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, and for many Sunnis where Bukhari and Muslim agree, it's like a certain, for many Muslims, that's like a golden fact. But it says that Allah writes with his hand. Well, I write with my hand. So the similitude has grown stronger. I have two hands, Allah has two hands, I write with my hand, Allah writes with his hand. At what point does this language become meaningless? I mean, if we're saying that, are we saying that when Allah writes, it's not like how we write? Well, I mean, Allah wrote for Moses, and Moses understood what Allah wrote. So that means that his writing is like my writing, because if I write, people can understand it. So long as it's within the right language, of course, so long as the linguistics are there. So if Allah writes in a way that's comprehensible, then his writing is like my writing. And he is writing with his hand like I am writing with my hand. So the similitude grows, but the point is this compromises the idea of the absolute otherness of Allah. Now, the defense, of course, is that any similitude linguistically of words like hands doesn't compromise Allah's otherness, because his hands are not like our hands. However, we've got Allah writing here something that is in creation. That's the Torah, which means that he's entered his creation and he's written. And since his writing is something that Moses could read, it means that Allah's action here is like anyone's action who writes that other people can understand. But then, I mean, and then we've got like possibly one of the funniest hadiths that we've ever come across, which is this one. And it is graded Sahih. And you can find it in Sunan al-Nasai 5379, book 49. Another way to reference it is Hadith, volume 1, Hadith. I might have got book Nasai 5379, book 49, Hadith, Hadith 1. Or Hadith 1, volume 6, book 49, Hadith 5381. I know that there's multiple ways of referencing hadiths, and it reads as follows. The Prophet said, "Those who are just and fair will be with Allah Most High on the thrones of light. At the right hand of the Most Merciful, those who are just in their rulings and in their dealings with their families and those whom they are in charge." And then it goes on to say that Muhammad, one of the narrators in this hadith, said, "And both of his hands are right hands." So that means Allah has two right hands, which I guess on the screen would probably be this side, two right hands. Often the butt of many a joke for those that are critics of Islam, but, this is giving a description to the hands of Allah. And, if you're going to argue that his hands are not like our hands, then I'll give it you on that one. It's definitely not like my hands. So if Allah writes with his right hands, and he's got two of them, and he's got a face and he's got eyes, what else has he got? Well, he's got a shin. In Surah 68:42, Hilali Khan writes, "The day the shin shall be laid bare, and they shall be called to prostrate to Allah," that's in brackets, "but they shall not be able to do so." So this is talking about the last day, and Allah reveals his shin, he shows his shin. And this is the thing that people recognize as being Allah on the last day, because I think we've got it here actually, a hadith talking about the Day of Judgment and why the shin needed to be revealed to people. So he's got a face and he's got eyes and he's got hands, and they're both right-handed, and he writes with them, and he's got a shin. So, does he have a leg? We've got one shin, a face, two right hands. If we were to do an icon of this, it would look monstrous. I'm sure you would agree. Now, it gets a little worse, because at the bottom of the shin there would appear to be a foot, as Abu Sa'id al-Khudri reports in Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 9, book 93, number 532. Hopefully I got my references right there, because there's a letter at the end rather than a number, so I wonder if there was a typo. Then the Almighty come to them in a shape other than the one which they saw the first time. So this is telling the story about the day of resurrection, where all the different people's worship are led off by the thing that they worship, and everyone who's worshipped something other than God is led to hell by the thing that they worship, like the sun, the moon, the stars, the cross, which is ironic because Christians don't worship the cross, we worship Jesus. But anyway, but then Allah comes and the people won't prostrate, they won't bow down to him because they don't recognize him. But then he comes back in a shape other than which they saw the first time, and he will say, "I am your Lord," and they will say, You are not our Lord, and none will speak to him then but the prophets. And then it will be said to them, do you know any sign by which you can recognize him? They will say, the shin. And so Allah will then uncover his shin, whereupon every believer will prostrate before him, and there will remain those who used to prostrate before him just for showing off and for gaining good reputation. So there you have it. Allah is going to reveal a shin. The people will recognize him because he reveals the shin. Now, Allah's clearly being described as having body parts. I have a shin, Allah has a shin, but the argument is that Allah's shin is not like our shin, that Allah's face is not like our face, Allah's eyes are not like our eyes, Allah's hands are not like our hands. Now, this is where the problem of Allah's complete otherness without any interaction in the creation creates a problem linguistically. Because what then is actually being communicated? What has been communicated? Because if Allah, like it says in Surah 57:4, by Hilal Khani version of the Quran, he it is who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and then rose over the throne. He knows that what goes into the earth and what comes from it, and what descends from the heaven and what ascends thereto, and he is with you wheresoever you may be, and Allah is the all-seer of what you do. If Allah's rising and descending doesn't mean what those words mean normally, and Allah's face doesn't mean what that word means normally, and Allah's hands don't mean what that word means normally, what has been communicated? What is actually being revealed? And this is the issue, because then Muslims, you've got two kind of camps that emerge within the Islamic world. You've got one kind of camp that takes these things literally. That's the Salafi camp, which believe that these things are real, that these things are not to be denied, that these things are actual qualities of Allah, actual aspects of Allah. And I just want to read to you a quote from them, if you just bear with us. Okay. Now, this is a quote from the foreword here from this book. So it was written, this is the Quran, and it's the forwarding notes from the scholars, and this is what they say. All that has been revealed by Allah's book as regards to the qualities of Allah the Most High, like his face, eyes, hands, shin, and then they put in brackets legs, his coming, his risings, over his throne, and others, because we haven't given a complete list. The religious scholars of the Quran and the Sunnah believe in these qualities of Allah, and they confirm that these are really his qualities without interpreting their meaning into different things. Now, this is the problem with the Salafi school, because if you're saying that you can't interpret these things into different things, or giving resemblance or similarity to any of the creatures, or completely ignoring or denying them, these are their words, that means that you've introduced multiplicity into the oneness of Allah. Because if you're saying that Allah's face really is his face, even though it's not like any other creature's face, but his face can't be reinterpreted to mean his essence, or his eyes, or his hands, or his shins, then that means his eyes, his hands, and his shins are something else. So his eyes not his eyes are not his hands are not his shins is not his face, his foot is not his legs. You've got this multiplicity that you've just introduced, an absurdity, an irrational contradiction within your concept of God. because you've said that these things are literal, you've introduced multiplicity into the singularity that you claim to believe in, just logically. The other problem with these things is that if you interpret them literally, it also, but then you say that these things are not resembling anything that a creature has. So the face of Allah is not like the face of any creature. Then you've got a problem of language, because what actually is being communicated there? The Quran claims to be clear guidance to mankind. But if you're saying the face doesn't mean anything that we can comprehend by analogy to actual faces, then what you've essentially said is that we can replace the word face with the word meh or the word blah, because it's equally nonsensical. So where it says that Allah has a face or a shin or eyes or a hand, we might as well just replace that with bleh or meh or any other noise that communicates nothing, because essentially that's what you're doing. You're communicating nothing. And this is supposed to be clear guidance. But what's clear about a face when it doesn't correspond to any understanding of face that we have? And then you get other kind of contradictions that emerge from that. If you're saying that the shin, the eyes, and the hands of Allah can't be reinterpreted into something else, then when you come across Surah 55, 26 to 27, using the Arbery version of the Quran, it reads, "All that dwells upon the earth is perishing, yet still abides the face of thy Lord, majestic and splendid." Or in Surah 28, 88, it says this, "And call not upon another God with God, there is no God but he, all things perish except his face. His is the judgment, and unto him you shall be returned." So this means that according to the Quran, everything perishes except the face of Allah. So there are now distinctions being introduced into these qualities of Allah, that all things perish except Allah's face. So what's happening to his eyes? What's happening to his shin? What's happening to his hands? This kind of irrational, nonsensical contradiction forces the Muslim apologist to do linguistic gymnastics. And then you've got if you've got other issues that emerge. So in Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 2, book 24, number 504, we read that the Prophet said, 7 people will be shaded by Allah under his shade on the day when there will be no shade except his. Now, if we're to interpret this as to mean shade, then this is mind-boggling, because what light could be so great as to create a shadow of Allah? What light could be great enough to force Allah into the shade or to cast a shadow? I mean, it cries out for non-literal interpretations. All of these texts cry out for non-literal interpretations. Because if Allah is casting a shadow, not only does it beg the question, what light is so great as to make Allah create a shadow? And if the answer is, well, Allah himself is light, which again is another similitude to something created, and it does compare Allah to in the Quran as the light. It compares him to light. It compares him to a created thing. That's in the Quran, in the Surah Al-Nur, in the light. If we're saying that Allah is the source of the light from which the shade is created from Allah, then that means that you've introduced distinguishments of qualities between Allah, that one is greater than the other, that the light of Allah is not shared by all the qualities of Allah, or that they are not shared in the same proportion. Truly it is that if God was to reveal his full majestic glory next to the blazing sun, the sun would appear as a black orb in the night in the sky. It would appear like a shadow. That is the greatness of the light of God. And and so all of this cries out for metaphorical interpretation. And then, of course, you've got other schools of Islam, like the Ashari, I think I've pronounced that correct, who deny literal interpretations. Man of God, please be patient. I have not opened it up, so please stop trying to jump in. So in terms of the Ashari school, they would try to argue that all of these things are metaphors. The face doesn't really mean face; it's a metaphor for something. Man of God, I'm going to ask you, please, to stop trying to jump in. I'm going to kick you from the studio again. If you try to come in before I invite people in, I'm going to just not let you on. So please practice patience. So in terms of the Ashari school, argues that these things are metaphors. But the problem with that, and that they are also, I was speaking to an Ashari Muslim yesterday, and he was arguing that where it says that the face of Allah, that this was just speaking about the essence of Allah, which obviously begs the question, if Allah wanted to say his essence, why didn't he just say his essence? I thought it was clear guidance. But the other problem with that is it says the face of Allah, the hands of Allah, the eyes of Allah. Linguistically, what it's saying is that these things are qualities, possessives of Allah. That the hands are not Allah, but they are possessed by Allah. The face is not Allah, but they are possessed by Allah. The eyes are not Allah, but they are possessed by Allah. So you've got a linguistic problem there, because then the whole meaning, the whole structure of what's being revealed breaks down, because they don't want to assert that Allah truly has hands and feet and shin and stuff like that. So whichever way you go about it, Islam is in a paradoxical problem. It's got irrational contradictions at the very source of its theology. So the obvious question then is and what makes this all compoundedly worse is that this isn't some man's writing about God. If you assume that what Muslims are saying is true, this is God talking about himself. And so Muslims end up having to use and this demonstrates a fundamental problem with Islam, is that Muslims will then say, well, our scholars say it's this, and our scholars say it's that, and our scholars say it's the other thing. Well, I'm sorry, but I thought that it was the book and the messenger that are meant to be the revelation, But what you're saying to me is that it's really what the scholars say, which means that Islam is just invented from one generation to the next by the scholars, and the Muslims themselves can't agree at which scholars you're supposed to believe in. It's a sign that you work amongst Muslims when you stop thinking about Muslims as a single monolithic group, and you start thinking about the Deobandi, and you start thinking about the Salafi, and you start thinking about the Ishmaelites and the Abadi and the Sufis. All of these different Muslim groups, and the Seveners and the Twelvers and the many other groups. All of another one is Barelvi. I might have mispronounced that one. All of these different groups, guys, have different scholars, and their scholars are saying different things, and their scholars are arguing different things. So it's all well and good to say, we should follow the scholars, but which scholars are the right ones. And so you've got this problem that the supposed book of clear guidance with the prophet who supposedly interpreted it, we can't find any evidence one way or the other that shows that Muhammad interpreted these verses in the Quran that I'm talking about one way or the other. Muslims themselves can't agree upon this, because if they did, if it was that clear cut, there'd be uniformity, but there isn't. And so that means that something as essential as the Muslim view of God is murray-bound in confusion, contradiction, paradox, and error. Now, the obvious retort, because the retort is always not to defend your religion if you're doing dawah, but simply to attack Christianity, is to point out that linguistically we've got exactly the same thing in the Bible. And I want to tell you, you're absolutely right. We really do have exactly the same thing in the Bible. But thank you for comparing your literally divinely words of God to something that you say is corrupt and man-made. Because that's what you just did. And yes, we Christians must wrestle with this issue. So let me wrestle with it for you, but as a Christian. Because as a Christian, I believe that the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, has opened up the minds and the hearts of men to know what God is doing in history, to know about God, to know how God wants us to live. But the men wrote it down in their own words. And so we should expect, because men are writing and men are fallible, that their descriptions of God will be imperfect. But imperfection is not the same as false. We experience the world through our senses imperfectly. But no one would turn around and argue that our experience of the world is a lie and cannot be trusted, because if you were to argue that, how could you possibly function? So the imperfection of our experience sensorially doesn't mean that our imperfect experiences are therefore not to be trusted. So yes, the imperfect descriptions that we find in the scripture do not equal falsehood. Likewise, I could come up with the perfect scam to steal your money, but no one would laud me for my truthfulness and honesty. So perfection does not have a correlation necessarily to truth. Now, we see imperfect descriptions in the Bible, and we see imperfect descriptions about God in the Quran. But as a Christian, we look at the imperfect descriptions of God in the Bible and we say, man wrote it. Of course, we're going to see imperfection, because man is the one that is having stuff revealed to him, and he's using something as limited as language to encapsulate something that we then use to understand God. And this is what, the fathers like St. Thomas Aquinas called the doctrine of analogy. That language is imperfect, and therefore what it can give to us is imperfect. But you're telling me as a Muslim that this Quran is perfect. That means all of its descriptions also have to be perfect. And if the descriptions are perfect, then I would like an answer to the question that I have just laid out for you. And if you can't give me an answer, if you understand the logic that I am making, that the perfect book is speaking imperfectly about God because of the limits of language, then you have to accept that the book itself is not perfect. And if it's not perfect, Islam is not true. So at this point, I am going to open it up. I'm going to invite anyone to come on. I want to make the rules really clear at the beginning. you will be invited on to either ask a question or make a comment. It has to be about the topic. You can be a Muslim or a Christian. You can either add to what I've said or argue against what I've said. But you have to be on topic. And I would, anyone who is an admin, the likes of Jason Bourne here, well, let's just expose him. Jason Bourne says that my claims are ridiculous, so now he will have the chance to come on and to show why they are ridiculous. So here's your opportunity, Jason. But for those of you that are new to the chat here or don't know the show, we have a number of Muslim trolls who come on onto the chat. They just don't engage with the argument. They just go through a script. They're not sincere. Jason isn't sincere. He doesn't really care about truth or dialogue. So please be aware that we've got people like that operating inside the chat, and don't be fooled by them. However, Jason, you're going to have your opportunity now to come on and to show me and anyone else. So you'll have the opportunity to come on for one comment, one question. There'll be a little bit of dialogue, but don't expect to be staying on forever. Please don't make me be rude. So this is your chance, man of God, if you want to jump back on. And anyone else, if you would like to come on. So Jason has claimed that my argument is ridiculous. I would await with anticipation for him to explain why my argument is ridiculous, because he's put it into the chat. I've put the link out into the chat, so now he can come onto the show and tell everyone why it's ridiculous. Let's see if he actually does. So let's, and oh, by the way, guys, I see you, Sam. I'm going to let you in. There's going to be a queue. So please be patient. I'll acknowledge that you're in the queue, but please be patient whilst we churn through the queue. And once you've been on, I'll take you out of the studio. Please just go back to the back of the end of the queue if you want to come back on and talk again. Merry Christmas, Sam.
Merry Christmas. Peace be with you, Bob. How are you?
Peace be with you, bro. I'm all right. Thanks be to God. How are you?
I'm very well. I just wanted to add, when you were mentioning about the sort of allegory or literal readings of the Quran, I just want to give you a perspective from an ex-revert's perspective, what I was taught to do. I was taught to look at the Quran as sort of, there are parts of it which are to be taken literally, so they are the word, well, all of it's the word of God from the start. But then there are other parts which were taught to me as poetry. I always think about how the Psalms are looked at in the Bible. So there's just my little input for you. I was just wondering what you thought of that.
Well, I mean, it's a great reproach in the sense of what they're saying is that there are different forms of literature inside the Quran, and there's certainly different kinds of claims inside of the Quran that we can deal with differently. But that Muslims claim that the whole of the Quran is meant to be poetic and majestic in its language. So it makes historical claims that we can therefore check, like the idea that Jews claim that God's hands were tied. That's a historical claim. It's putting those words in the Jewish mouth. So we should be able to find evidence of where Jews have said that. But I'm happy to accept that different statements inside the Quran have to be treated differently. And in my presentation today, I've shown you how the same text of the Quran are interpreted differently by different theological schools of Islam, the Ashari and the Salafi. One is saying that it's metaphor. The other one is saying that it's a real quality. It's not a metaphor. We can't interpret it into something else. We can't deny it, and we can't ignore it. And so, who's right? Which set of scholars is really representing Muhammad's thinking, and which one has distorted Muhammad's thinking? So, yeah, that would be how.
No, I actually agree with you there. But if you like, is certainly from the group that I was with, and I would say
do you maybe want to tell the audience what group you were with, or do you want to keep that more private? I know.
EFL.
So yeah, this is Sam. Sam is. Am I right to talk about it, Sam?
Go for it.
Yeah. So Sam used to be a Muslim. He converted because of the EF Dawah channels that we see on YouTube, and now he's a Christian. Is that right, Sam?
Thanks be to God. Yes.
Thanks be to God. Yeah. So he's got experience of what the EF Dawah channels say when the cameras aren't rolling.
Well, so I actually didn't have an issue with, you know, the whole idea that there's some parts of the Quran were treated differently in terms of maybe allegory or poetry, or even the idea that, say, I guess this is actually a very common practice within Islam, isn't it? If there's a part of this book you don't understand, you go to an actual scholar or someone who's got some genuine knowledge on it. Now,
so just very briefly, Sam, did you ever touch upon, and I do see it, Islam Destroyer, Doga, and Mr. Brown. I will let you all on, don't worry. Sam, do you, when you were moving around in those circles, did the question of Allah's face, hands, shins, eyes ever come up? And if so, how was it taught to you?
I brought it up just once, and to be honest, the answer I had at the time sufficed. It was just as simple as is this do we take this as literal or as allegory? Essentially, that's all I asked, and I was told it was best to look at it as allegory.
Okay, so
which
so
at the time was
we're
an
going the
answer.
Ashari school of thought.
Yeah, which was an answer I was quite happy with at the time.
Yeah,
you know?
No, I fully get that. That just poses other problems, you know.
No, I agree. I'm just saying.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm happy to accept there are different ways to wrestle with this problem that I've laid out, and that's why I demonstrated the fact that there are two different answers and ways to wrestle with it: the metaphorical or the kind of it is, but we're not saying what it is kind of approach. And the problem with the metaphor thing is that what is actually being described, and by what authority do we assert that this is the accurate interpretation? So that's the kind of question that we'll wrestle with. Anyway, Sam, lovely to see you. Feel free to join the back of the queue if you want, and I'm going to let in Islam Destroyer because he's next in the queue. So Islam Destroyer, you're up.
Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm a former Muslim atheist. I want to ask you a question.
Yep.
Can you,
on topic?
Yeah. Can you
Right.
can you elaborate your last argument on the imperfection of Bible?
Yeah. So basically, as Christians, what we believe about the Christian faith is that God has spoken in history through the person of his Son, but he's also spoken through in the past, in latter days, through his prophets. But our concept of God's revelation is very different from the Islamic concept of God's revelation. So in Islam, you believe, I know you're ex-Muslim atheist, so not you, but Muslims believe that it's the concept of Nazil, that Allah speaks directly, and what he speaks directly is transmitted via an angel to a prophet and is then recorded in a book. That's the concept of Nazil. I don't think I'm misleading there. But as Christians, we believe that our understanding of inspiration is that God, it's like God coming to you. He lets you see what he's doing in history, or some aspect about him as a person, or some action that he's doing in history, or how he wants people to believe. You get that revelation. You get that sort of vision. Your human faculties have been elevated to see what God is doing, but then you write it down in your words. So they are your words. They're not God's words. So this kind of when we see something that is like an imperfect description of God, something that captures something of what God has done, but then would cause us to have question about, well, what are the implications of this? Because this is not sufficient. Well, we Christians accept that language cannot sufficiently describe God. And so we would say that these things are imperfect. But the imperfection of the language is an essential part of the Christian understanding of language and of the concept of revelation. But imperfection is not the same as falsehood, because we experience many things imperfectly. But that doesn't. No one would then say that we don't, that we haven't got a true experience of something. So perfection and truth are not equivalents. In the same way that I could create a scam that's perfect, you know, con you of your money, but no one would laud me for my honesty or achievement. You know, these two things are not equivalents. So I hope that answers your question, Islam Destroyer.
Thanks. That was a good answer, and you have clarified the doubts of most Muslims in how Christian theology works. Most Muslims don't know about how other religions' theologies work.
No, this is absolutely true. The level of education amongst Muslims who do dawah about the Christian faith is horrendously bad, and we're about to probably see a couple of examples of just how bad it is. I noticed that Jason Bourne hasn't joined the queue yet, despite the fact that he's still got prattling on inside the chat, even when he's given the opportunity. But yeah, education amongst Muslims about the Christian faith is really poor, and we're inviting Muslims to embrace a better religion than Islam, not a worse religion than Islam, a better one that is, for instance, at least intellectually coherent. Anyway, thanks for having you on. Feel free to join the back of the queue if you want. Next up is going to be Doga. In you come, Doga. How are we doing?
How are you doing, Bob? Not bad, you?
I'm all right, thanks be to God. How are you, sir?
Yeah, good. No,
Have you had a
what
good
it was?
holiday? Go on, jump in.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna say because you said one question and all that. I don't think that's really.
Yeah. Go on.
It's not really gonna work like that. I was saying when can we set up maybe for a longer discussion when you're free?
Bro,
When would you be free?
if you want to talk to me, all you need to do is email me. I'll put my email now into the comments, so it'll appear in the comments. We can arrange to talk via Skype to your heart's content.
Okay, so can we
There you go.
do a debate? What are we gonna do a debate on? Remember we had original debate discussion in Marriott's, obviously, as you remember. We were supposed to have a follow-up, remember, and we never got a chance.
Okay, so yeah, contact me via the email I've just put into the chat. We'll arrange it and we'll organize it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would the topic be? It's going to be same topic on the Bible.
Doga, we'll talk about that in private, sir. Yeah.
Right,
so okay then. Was that everything you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. I just went to from the.
All right.
I'm still waiting to put a follow on. Yeah. So that's what I'll come on for.
You've got my email address. I've just put it into the chat. Okay. So I'll talk with Doga in private. I don't think it needs to be a public debate, but yeah, we'll give him that opportunity. Mr. Brown, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Shalom, shalom, everybody.
It's always nice to see you or hear from you. I don't know why you hide your face, bro. Everyone knows what you look like. We see you with the corner.
I don't look so great because I haven't shaved and haven't had a haircut. I look like a mess.
I'm pretty sure there's a hadith somewhere that says people that shave their beards, it's haram or something. But maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, go on. What would you like to talk about?
I just want to first of all just give credit where credit is due. Yeah. So I've noticed because I watch a lot of apologetic programs, right? On YouTube videos, and I've noticed you don't all the time focus on Islam. You do your own Christian work too. Yeah. So I just want to give credit where credit is due, unlike the other apologetics, because for the past 10 years, all they've been doing is just bashing Islam. But anyway, with that just being said, so going back to the topic, Bob, our God, the declaration of our God has been made on his unity, his sincerity, and monotheism has been made on the 112th chapter of the Quran. And if I can just read it out for you.
Yeah, what surah is it?
Surah Ikhlas, 112th chapter.
1 second.
12. Yeah.
I'm going to let you read it, but I just want to get to it. Going in the wrong direction. 112. And what ayah, please?
Surah Ikhlas, so I'm not sure that ayah right now.
Okay, there's not that many ayahs. Go on, read it. I'll probably find it.
You'll find it. Yeah. Okay. So it says there, say God is one God, the eternal God, be begotten not, neither he is begotten, and there is not any one like unto him. Through that, we can get the gist of it. So there's whatever you're imagining, like how you've described God having two chins and so two right hands and a chin. It's already been declared. It's nothing that you can imagine onto him. So if there are descriptions that's been given and you want to take it literally, that's just in your head. But how the original arrows translate is metaphorical, and whatever you can imagine, it's something that you can't comprehend. Because as I said last time when we discussed it, is the creator of this universe as we see it and beyond. And we're talking about this creator, and we're trying to imagine how he would look like or what he's thinking. It's just something that we cannot compute. But as I said, our declaration of God has been given, and who he is, what he is on that, and that's how we understand God. There's nothing onto him. But it's funny that it mentions be not begotten, nor is he begotten, meaning he doesn't beget, nor is he begotten, right? It's funny that the word begotten is mentioned in the Quran, but in the new translations of the Bible, you won't find the word begotten. Like the NIV, it doesn't have the word begotten there, but you will find the word begotten there. So I think that's there for you Christians, because you say God beget a son. But anyway, that's another one. But that's diverting a little bit.
Yeah,
but going back to the topic. Sorry, Bob, I just want to clarify.
Hold on, Mr. Brown.
I just want to add something from the Jewish text to confirm.
Don't make me remove you.
Okay,
be polite. So,
yeah.
Here's my issue, right? You've said that Allah is completely other to anything that He has created. That's something that I stated in my presentation, and that it says here that say He is one. So my question to you is, when it describes Allah as having a shin, hands, two hands, according to the hadiths, that they're both right-handed, that he's got eyes, that he's got a face, are these the same thing or are they different things?
These are, I would say, and again, metaphorical, in a sense, when he says two right hands.
My question is, are they the same thing or are they different things?
I don't understand what you mean by same and different. What
you see, and that's the problem with Islamic theology, is it forces Muslims to make a nonsense of language. You, Mr. Brown, absolutely do know what I mean by same and different. But when you try to think about same and different in terms of Allah, all of these meanings dissolve into nothingness. Because on the one hand, because you're trying to affirm two things that are contradictory. You're trying to affirm the idea that Allah is an absolute singularity on one hand, so he is one, but then you're trying to say, on the other hand, that he has all these different attributes and all these different qualities, which is multiplicity and composite. And because you can't reconcile that contradiction, when someone asks you a very simple question using words that you do actually understand, suddenly your brain just freezes over. Because Islamic
we're talking about the creator of the heavens and the earth.
So
it's not as simple as A, B, and C. But
so I'll ask you again.
Bob, if I was to reverse the question to you, how is God described in the Bible?
Mr. Brown, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
My question to you is very simple. Okay, and at this, I'm then going to let you go, and you can go to the back of the queue, and you can come back on again, like Sam is. I see you, Sam. When it says that Allah is one, and then it says that Allah has a face, and he has shin, and he has hands, and he has eyes, are those shin, hands, eyes, and face the same, or are they different?
No, they're the question is it's not logical, because
so there's a problem with the question.
it's already because the descriptions, as I said, it's already there. There's nothing onto him. The verse is already saying it. So if you're saying you're getting a verse from the Hadith where somebody is trying to interpret in the human sense, and that's what you're gonna get, and that's the result you're gonna get. But and
Okay.
again, but you were talking something beyond this human sense. You're talking about a different.
Okay,
Mr.
Brown.
It's not something
Yeah, Mr. Brown,
simple like that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let you out so that other people can come in. Feel free to come back on if you want. So Aladdin, you're up next. So my point is, as you saw when I asked Mr. Brown a very simple question, because he's quoted the right surah, you know, God bless him. He's quoted exactly the right surah, which is this idea that Allah is completely one, an absolute singularity. But then that causes an irrational contradiction, because if you're saying that Allah is completely one, then his face is his shin, his hands are his shin, his his eyes are his shin, which means that what was the point in talking about these things at all as different? What has been revealed there? But then if we're saying, as the Salafists do, because Mr. Brown is not following the Salafist doctrine when he argues like that, the Salafist doctrine is to affirm that these things are real. There really is a hand, there really is a face, there really is a shin, but we can't say what they are. But they are Allah, but they're not Allah, as Shabir Ali famously said recently. This involves a rational contradiction the other way, because that compromises the idea of the singularity and the oneness of Allah, because Allah is one, yes, but he's got a face, and his face is not his shin, and his shin is not his hands, and his hands is not his eyes, and that's a composite one, not a singularity. And thus this is why I reject Islamic theology. This is why I reject the call of the Adhan, and instead invite Muslims to come and worship the one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So, Aladdin, how are you? Jason, when are you going to join the queue, bro?
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening. It's almost 12 midnight here. I'm talking to you from the other side of the world.
Congratulations. Technology is amazing.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I have a question regarding something that you mentioned between minute 7 and minute 9, which is not related to the topic, if you don't mind me. When you were talking, no, it's
you can
something
ask the question, but I don't guarantee to answer, because it should
sure,
be
sure. Sure, no problem. If you don't mind me asking you, you said Hilali Khan version of the Quran.
Yeah.
Then you said Yusuf Ali version of the Quran.
Yep.
Do you have any Islamic sources called Hilali Khan and Yusuf Ali as version of the Holy Quran? Or is it that your own understanding for it?
Okay, so I will deal with that question very briefly. Thank you very much for your question. Feel free to join the back of the queue if you would like. So yeah, I'm using this term version because Muslims, when they talk about the Bible, they make a big deal about, oh, the NASB version and the ESV version and the Good News version, and they make a big stress upon this word version, as if each one of these versions is somehow demonstration of the fact that the Bible has been changed and therefore it can't be trusted. Well, I'm just pointing out there are different versions of the translation of the Quran. By pointing out these different translations, which are called versions, which you can call versions. That's how you can speak about different translations. It's linguistically acceptable. And so it's just to point out, if you don't like that kind of, if you don't like the implications that you are making, then maybe you should dig a little deeper about the idea of, what do Christians mean when we talk about versions of the Bible? And I just want to point out that Jason Bourne, who's very active in the chat, has declined to jump on. Let's just look. He's still chatting away. Look, there he is. You are using the Quran. Is Jesus called Kalam Allah? The answer is no. Guys, this guy he's not engaging. He's not interested in having an honest conversation. He's not a sincere person. I just want to make sure that you're all aware of it. So I'm going to put him on timeout because I don't know if any admins have done that yet. Just because, you know, he's got this opportunity to come and say why I'm wrong. He said so in the chat that I'm wrong, but he's not doing so. So he can come into the chat and he can talk with me if he wants to. But I've put him on timeout because he is a troll and he's not. I'm not going to block him, Bloodfire, but he is a troll, and I want to, you know, give him the opportunity to listen. How are we doing, Sam?
I'm pretty good. I just wanted to pick up on the point I previously was talking about, because I think throughout the Islamic literature there are many references to like God's hands, feet, etc. But there was one verse, and I know you've brought it up, that I did have an issue with, mainly because of the context of the verse, and it's the one that says everything will be destroyed except his face.
Yeah.
Now, because the reason I had an issue with this is how if you take this one as literal, it presents a massive problem, because at the end of the day, from my understanding of Allah within Islamic theology, things like this shouldn't be able to happen to him. Nothing of Allah at all should be able to be destroyed. And also, if you take it just allegory, what do you get out of this passage?
Yeah.
By taking it as allegory.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and what's communicated by everything and what's communicated by faiths, these words then start to break down. I noticed that in my discussion with an Ashari Muslim yesterday. You know, within minutes of me pressing him on certain points, that language stopped meaning what it meant. You know, the face of Allah didn't mean the face of Allah. It meant the essence of Allah. And then I asked him, well, where are you getting that from? And he says, I'm getting it from the scholars. And it's particular scholars, not all scholars, the particular scholars that he follows.
Well, it's like, even if it's the essence, that's still a part of God, right? And if that's getting destroyed, then...
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
You see, if the shin is meant to be, you know, like, well, firstly, is the shin distinguishable from the face? If it is, then is the shin destroyed but the face preserved? But if the shin is indistinguishable from the face, then why do we call the shin and the face? It's kind of like language breaks down. I see you, Mr. Brown. I see you, Aladdin. Thank you very much, Sam. It's a fair point.
And
Feel free to come back.
Peace be with you, Bob.
Peace be with you, bro.
Peace be with you, bro. And also, Bloodfire. Good to see you in the chat as well.
Okay, Mr. Brown, you're back in.
Hello, shalom, salam again. So right, so when we talking about God oneness, and if we can reverse it in the Bible, so
no, Mr. Brown, we're not changing the topic, sir.
It's the same topic.
Is, the topic is
it's within the topic. It's within the topic.
Go on.
If you can just let me go with it and just follow through with me. So if we go to Barakat, which is the Tanakh 61ab, it says the creation of man and woman. Yeah, if you want references, and then we have a rabbi, Yeremiah ben Eliza, and he confirms on Tilihin 139 5, where he says the Holy One, blessed be He, was created with two faces, Adam and Eve first, man. Then he created man and female in one body. And Christians believe that man was created in the image of God. So now here we have it in the Tanakh, where it's saying Adam and Eve was initially one body with two faces, meaning hermaphrodite or androgynous. So if God was created if man was created in the image of God, so God originally was androgynous. And if we go to, if I can quote you quickly, Isaiah 14:12, and if you go to the King James Version, it says Lucifer, the morning star. And if you go to the NIV, it says morning star. And if you go to Revelation, this is the declaration of Jesus. If you want to pull it up, Bob, Revelations 22:16. This is a declaration of Jesus himself, right? He says, I have sent my angels to testify unto you these things in the churches, and I am the root and the offspring of David, meaning he's the root, he's the creator of David and the offspring, right? And the bright and morning star. So here Jesus is claiming to be Lucifer, the morning star, and God here is saying it by his own name and his admission by Jehovah Elohim, which is plural. He's saying within those names is the description of God, both male and female, contains within Jehovah Elohim.
Right, Mr. Brown,
So
can I stop you now?
with that,
Stop.
yeah,
Stop.
go
Right.
for it, yeah.
So I'm not going to reply to anything that's not on topic. So we're going to stick to the image of God, and I would just like you to answer these questions, please. If you refuse to answer the questions, I'll remove you, and I'll just continue with my presentation. Do you believe that God is capable of moral and just action?
Moral and just actions, of course.
Right. Yes. Who gave man his morality?
He was taught, so yeah, it would have been God who taught him.
God.
Well, Adam.
So wait, God
Yeah.
is capable of moral and just action. God gave man his concept of morality. Is it true, therefore, to say that both man and God have a similitude, i.e. a similarity, in their operation of morality?
Of man and God. No.
So God
And
is
again,
capable.
that's really complex.
No,
And
let me
again,
ask you this
God.
question. Let's put another question another way, Mr.
Yeah.
Brown. You've agreed with me, and I agree with you, that God is capable of moral and just action. Is man capable of moral and just action?
Not all the time, no.
No, but is he capable of moral and just action?
Ultimately, no.
So man is not capable of moral and just action. You agree with the Christian doctrine of the depravity of man?
No, I agree. Ultimately, man will always be like, so man, God told Adam, don't eat of the fruit of the forbidden tree, right? Or
No,
in
Mr.
your
Brown,
case, you told Eve. Wait,
Mr. Brown, I'm
But,
going to remove you.
but man forgot.
Okay, so Mr. Brown doesn't want to engage with a question, so I'm going to give him time to cool down. But he talked about the image of God thing. Now, the fact of the matter is, if we accept that both God that God performs moral and just actions, and that man is capable of moral and just actions, then it is fair to say that because when God performs moral and just action, it being a reflection of his character, and man being capable of moral and just action, that is given to him as a reflection of God's character, that man is made in the image of God. Man can choose to obey and to disobey God's will. God himself is free and has no restraint on his will. Therefore, we both have free will. God is a spirit, non-corporeal being. Human beings have a non-corporeal aspect to our nature, the spiritual nature. God can love, cherish, care, be angry with, hate. For instance, God hates polytheism. Man is also capable of love, cherishing, caring, anger, and hatred. Though often, because of our sin, we direct this emotional framework wrongly. And so what we see is that man is made in the image of God. Is it not logical to conclude that the 99 names of Allah, for instance, the attributes and characters and abilities of Allah that are described in the 99 names, also demonstrate the similitude between man and God? Allah is merciful. Well, I too can be merciful. So if someone wrongs me and I am merciful to them, then I am merciful. And thus, if I am merciful and Allah is merciful, then am I not a image of his mercy? if I love and Allah loves, then am I not an image of his love? Now, granted, the image is like that of a photograph to the real person. Like the image that you're seeing on your screen is a flat image. It is in no way a real representation of me. I'm three-dimensional. You're all looking at a two-dimensional flat screen. But the point is, it is an image of the real person. But at the same time, it is an image of the person without being the person. And so you've got this issue within Islam that they are denying the similitude of the image of man to God when all the evidence points that it exists. And if Mr. Brown had just engaged rather than trying to jump off the topic, he would have stayed on longer. So, he can go to the back of the queue and he can try. In fact, no, what I'll do is I'll finish what I'm saying and then I'll let him back in and he'll get a chance to reply to what I'm actually saying. So you've also got the fact that in a Hadith Bukhari number 6277 and also found in Muslim number 2841, it says Allah created Adam in his image. Now, the same hadith then goes on to say that Adam was made 60 cubits, which is 27.5 meters in height. Now, forgetting for the fact that just contradicts everything that we know about human biology and development, and the fact that people have been growing taller in history, not shorter in history. But we'll just glide over that. I'm going to give Mr. Brown an opportunity to come back on and to reply to what I've said about man being made in the image of God. And I'd like him to reply to that. If he doesn't, I'm just going to remove him and put him to the back of the queue. Mr. Brown, would you like to reply to what you heard?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. But could I just ask you a question instead?
Sure.
And you can just, yeah. Okay, so I've been watching a lot of, talks on Christianity, and I've noticed from the J. Smith era, it changed. Before then, Christians were preaching the book. Like when they preached the good word, they converted half of Africa. They didn't go to Africa and say, "Oh, you guys are pagans."
Ask your question, sir.
So
you just need enough time.
I'm asking you a question. So the question is, why have Christians like J. Smith have changed and flipped and adopted the Jesuits order, a method of preaching, which is preaching hate? And that's my question. Yeah.
So the question is, are we preaching hate? The answer is, it's obviously nonsense. This is just something that Muslims throw at Christians because they don't like what they're hearing. And as you saw, Mr. Brown couldn't answer the question. I had demonstrated the similitude between the image of man being the image, that man is the image of God, is a reflection of aspects of who God is, that God has built man in his image. And I've demonstrated that. And this actually is one of the reasons why, and Aladdin, you're on next, this is one of the reasons why as Christians, we don't have, and I'm just going to put Jason Bourne on another timeout because he's once again declined to come on. So, we Christians don't have the same kind of problems that I've articulated in this show that Islamic theology has, because we have two touchstones upon which language makes sense. One is that we are made in the image of God. So when we say that God is merciful, then we have a reflection that we can base that understanding on. We say that God is merciful. Sam, you're on after Aladdin. We say that God is merciful, and we say that God is merciful because he, we have an understanding of mercy because we are made in his image. So when we are merciful, it allows us to have some glimpse of what it means to say that Allah is merciful. But if you say that Allah is not like anything that he has created, then what does it mean to say that he is merciful? What does it mean? If you don't have any point of reference, how does that language even make sense? The only way that it can make sense is if it actually, the word merciful corresponds to something that we experience. And that is why man is made in the image of God, so that when God says something about himself, we actually have some kind of glimmer of hope of understanding what is being communicated. But Islam doesn't have that. And what's really interesting is how Muslims are arguing against their own literature. Because I just quoted you a hadith that said that man was made in the image of Allah, but Muslims ignore it. And I know why they ignore it. It's because they're saying that that God created an image, and that image is owned by Allah, not that the image is Allah, which I actually think is a misreading of the hadith, but that's what they say.
Okay, don't talk, it's me.
Aladdin, how are you? So you're obviously there with some people. I just want to say hello to all the people in the room with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's almost 12 a.m. in my place. I hope that you'll give me the opportunity to speak about some of the points that you mentioned.
So the rules are, sir, Aladdin.
Yeah, rules. Yeah, I respect your rules. I stick to the
comment or question.
Because you speak about the mercy of Allah, and you said that the mercy of Allah, and we have mercy, so that's an image of Allah. Then you spoke about the hadith that you said that Allah made Adam in his image. So you misquote those two things. So I would like to clarify them, if you don't mind me, if you please.
Okay, so let's be clear. You're invited to make a comment. Make your comment, but I want you to understand. You know, you're not going to be given like a 20-minute.
No. Of course, I want a couple of minutes.
Say what you want to say.
Thank you very much. God bless. First of all, when you spoke about God made Adam in his image, you misquote the hadith. The hadith is saying in Arabic, خَلَقَ اللَّهُ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ. Image here refers to Adam. It doesn't refer to Allah, which means that Allah, Almighty God, create Adam on the image of Adam that he looks like, with 2 feet, 2 legs, 2 eyes, hands. So that's the image of Adam that God created Adam on. So image here refers to Adam, not to Allah. So you misquote the hadith and you misinterpret the hadith, number one.
No, I actually said that, Aladdin.
No,
I
you
said that literally before I let you on. You weren't listening, but carry on.
I'm sorry. If I was not listening, please forgive me.
Clearly. You were talking to someone, obviously.
No, because it's okay. Number two, you were talking about the mercy. You said if Allah is merciful and I am merciful, so therefore the mercy of Allah is in me, so therefore I'm an image of Allah. No, because your mercy is limited. The mercy of Allah is unlimited. So you cannot compare the limited with unlimited. Allah's mercy is eternal. Your mercy is not eternal. So you cannot compare the eternal with the non-eternal. So therefore your mercy is given to you by Allah, because Allah is Rahman Rahim, mercy and gracious. So mercy on us, the life here, and Rahim in the life hereafter, which is spread all around the Muslims. I hope that this answers your question. I wanted to make one more comment. Okay.
Aladdin, no, allow me to one comment, sir. So allow me to reply to that, because you make your problems worse. Firstly, the hadith that I quoted, I actually gave the very kind of interpretation that you give, in terms of how Muslims try to explain this hadith. I actually said it before you came on. You just clearly weren't listening. But it says Allah created Adam in his image. Now, the translators, for whatever reason, I don't know, but the translators of this hadith have used the English custom of capitalizing the H, referring to his, in reference to, the image of Allah. Now, if this was the creation, if the his was the creation, it wouldn't make sense to give it a possessive in the way that the hadith does. The image is owned by someone, so that means that it's owned by Allah. So it's Allah's image. It's not the image of Adam, because if it was the image of Adam, you would have to construct that entire sentence something differently. But it's giving the image as the possession of the creator, not of the created. That's how I read the hadith. I understand that Muslims interpret that hadith in a different way, but you also spoke about mercy. Now, to get us to the quick, mercy is a transaction. You know that, I know that. It will only take a few minutes of interrogation to establish that as a fact. It's a transaction between two parties. If you say that Allah is merciful eternally, you end up with a paradox, because who was he merciful towards before he created anything? Because the thing is, if mercy is a transaction, before there was a transaction, then that means that Allah wasn't merciful. Now, also, and thus he changes when he creates, because then he becomes merciful. Now, we as Christians have a different understanding of how these things operate, and it'd be interesting to know if you know how we think about these things. But finally, I would point out that you also stated that our mercy is not like Allah's mercy because his mercy is infinite. Well, the problem is that you've reduced the difference between our mercy and his mercy to a quantitative difference, not a qualitative difference. It's just a quantitative difference. It's like if I have a bottle of water, which is a liter, by the way, that's a liter, and if I have a gallon of water or an ocean of water, that means that the mercy that we have and the mercy that Allah has is the same. Because if the only difference is that it is quantitatively different, it is the same. And thus I am right in saying that the image of God is established in us. Now, let me ask you this question. And this is the question that I want you to answer. The question is this. If you're saying that our mercy and Allah's mercy are not the same thing, what does the mercy of Allah mean? What is actually it? Describe Allah's mercy to me without making reference to human mercy.
Now, will you allow me to comment in both the points that you brought up and answer the question? Then I would like to talk about the hadith.
No,
First
sir.
of all,
I'm going to ask you to answer the question that I've asked you to
I'll
ask.
answer the question.
Otherwise,
Okay.
you just go to the back of the queue and then you can comment when you come back in.
Okay, I'll answer the question, then I'll go back to the end of the queue and I'll come back to comment again.
Okay, that's fine.
First of all, what you are trying to do here so hard, you are trying to compare the limited with the unlimited. And you are trying to make the unlimited equal to the limited, which does not work with any normal mind. God, with all his attribution, he's unlimited. We, mankind, with all our attribution, we are limited. So here you are trying to equal the unlimited with limited, which doesn't make sense to me. I hope that answers your question. You want me to carry on or follow?
No, I want you. I'll remove you. Go to the back of the queue, and then you can come back in. So I asked him to describe to me Allah's mercy without making reference to human mercy. That was a very. It is quite a profound question. But please note, he didn't actually even attempt to address the question at all. And the reason for that is exactly the point that I'm making. If you're saying that Allah is completely other than us, then what does it even mean to say Allah is merciful? This is why you need to affirm, and Christians do affirm and Jews do affirm, that man is made in the image of God, so that this language of God about God's mercy makes sense. Without some touch point between the transcendent otherness of God and the immanent experience of the human person, then language about God falls and collapses into nihilistic void nonsense. You might as well say blah, meh. I mean, because you're communicating just as much by saying that Allah is blah as you are as by saying Allah is merciful, if you have no point of reference to say what does mercy mean. And that is why the image of God. And please note, he didn't even, I don't think he even understood the point that I made to him, because he then went on to say that the Allah's mercy is infinite. Well, that's just a quantitative difference, not a qualitative difference. What is the qualitative difference between Allah's mercy and our mercy? Not a quantitative difference, because if your only argument is that they are quantitatively different, then that means you are conceding that the word does mean as we understand it to mean, which means that we are also reflections of the mercy of God when we act mercifully. Before I let you on, Sam, just want to point out, this is the kind of comment that we get from trolls. We've got shouts over and be rude in speaker's corner and kicks people out online and chat debates. You just can't debate, can you, Bob? Well, Jim Bob, here's your opportunity to come on and talk with me. Perhaps you weren't around at the beginning of the show when I explained the rules. Mr. Brown that's why he's been able to follow them for the most part, is that you're being invited to talk about the topic, to stay on topic. That's why Mr. Brown was removed, because he didn't stay on topic, and he refused to engage and wanted to move off topic. And also, I'm not just going to let people eat up time for no reason. If you're just waffling, if you're not talking about the topic, if you're, wasting everyone's time, you come on, you make a comment, you make a question. So here's your chance, Jim Bob. Let's see if you'd like to take it up. And where's Jason? Is he still chattering away in the chats whilst ignoring the opportunity to come on and talk to me?
Is Jason gonna do a lambing and offer you £1,000 and never give it?
Jason's just doing what he always does. He's there to he knows what he's doing. He's there to do. He's looking for weak Christians in the chat. That's what he's looking for, and he's been given opportunity after opportunity to come on the program like Mr. Brown has, but doesn't. So, go on, Sam.
So anyways, the last time I was in Speaker's Corner, I ended up in a discussion with Sam Dower, and one thing that I remember we ended up talking about was the difference between literal and allegory, because he brought up one of the Psalms. Couldn't quote you which one, but basically in the Psalm it said the judges are gods. So then he was trying to construct this argument of these are gods that you've also got to worship as well within your Christian faith. I was like, well, no, as far as I understand the Psalms, they're poems written by songwriters, and we're not to look at them like this. I guess, could you comment on that? I heard this one crop up a couple of times, that they try to hold us to a similar standard, like everything in our Bible is literal and not necessarily like, say, the Psalms, which are just poems.
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages of the scriptures is that for the most part, it's very clear, because of the way that the books are collected, which kind of literature you're dealing with. You're dealing with the biography of Jesus in the Gospels. You're dealing with reactive letters of instruction in the epistles of Paul. You're dealing with poetry in the book of Psalms. Whereas in the Quran, it's just a mishmash. You've got the poetic, the instructive, the direct speech, all thrown together as one, and then the scholars come along and have to say to you, which bit do you take literal, which bit is just metaphor. And there's no, in my experience of asking, I can't find Muslims finding justification for hadiths or justification for schools of scholarship, or being able to root their various different interpretations in something that Muhammad said. It's all, this scholar said this and that scholar said that. Not Muhammad said this about the Quran, but this scholar said this about the Quran. And it's like, I find that problematic, especially when the Quran is very clear. You believe in the book and you believe in the messenger. That's it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I just find it a bit disingenuous how, say, for example, how Sandow is trying to hold, say, the Psalms of all things to the standard of the Quran. And also that seemed very intellectually dishonest to do that.
Yeah.
And because I guess I was just trying to give you sort of an idea of some of the new arguments I've now started to hear, but frankly, they just sound ridiculous.
These are not new arguments, I promise you, Sam. These are not
probably
new arguments.
Not, but they're new to me.
Yeah. There might be. All right, sir. Good to hear from you. Peace with you, bro.
By the way, Bob, give us a call one of these days.
Yeah, will do. So and I'm going to start turning more to the chat because no one's in the studio anymore. So Jim Bob, are you going to come on, bro? Here he is. He's still there saying that I'm talking rubbish. Why doesn't he come and talk with us? I guess that be right back is probably what that's saying. So Aladdin, I'll let you in a moment. So here's the thing. It's kind of like the question that I would like, Aladdin to address is the question that I asked him the last time. if Allah's mercy is different to ours a mercy, if it is different, explain it to me without making reference to human mercy. How are we doing, Aladdin? I hope your little confab has worked. What was the consensus of the group in the room?
So hope that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, Bob, let me tell you that English is my fourth language. So I hope that you understand my English. I'm not as good as you are in English, okay? That number one.
Your English is better than... What language is your first language?
Arabic.
Okay, Arabic. Yeah, your English is better than my Arabic, so you got nothing to apologize for.
My second language is English. My second language is Filipino. My third language is Japanese, and my fourth language is English. So should I try with that? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I would like to answer your question, and please this time allow me to make a comment again about the hadith, which you said I have to go back to the queue. Then made my comment, if you don't mind. First of all, you should know that in the traditional hadith, a traditional saying of Prophet Muhammad, and you can read this in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that when Allah created heaven and earth, He created 100 mercy. So therefore, He sent one of those mercy to mankind, to His creation, and He left 99 mercy up in heaven to use it on the day of judgment upon His creation. So therefore, those 100 mercy were created, separated from the mercy of Allah. Allah's mercy is unlimited, eternal. That's what I was trying to tell you a while ago. Our mercy is a created. So therefore, you are trying here to compare between the creation and the creator, which doesn't goes with that, which is not accepted for us as a Muslim. So this is the difference between man's mercy and God's mercy.
Aladdin, sorry, 1 second. I'm asking you to describe what Allah's mercy is to me. Can you do that?
Allah's mercy is unlimited. That's one of God's attribution. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about this. It's in Surah Al-Kahf. Okay, I'm telling you.
What is mercy?
Mercy, that's rahmah, love. Everything that comes from Allah.
Do you love?
Do I love? You're asking me about love?
Do you love?
Of course I do.
Does Allah love?
Of course He do.
Do you hate?
Yes, I do.
Does Allah hate?
Not really.
Do you cherish?
Yes.
Does Allah cherish?
Yes.
What does it mean to say that Allah hates?
You see, I did not tell you that Allah hates. I said might. Okay? So I'm trying to tell you here, Bob, that you are trying to compare between the creation and the creator. And you are
you've misunderstood my criticism. My criticism is that when you say that Allah is merciful, without a point of reference, Aladdin, without a point of reference, here's the point that I'm making. This is the point you need to address. Without a point of reference, i.e. that man is made in the image of God, to say that Allah is merciful doesn't say anything at all. Because what does it mean to say Allah is merciful? Now that's the problem. What's your response?
Once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about His mercy in the Holy Quran in chapter 18, verse 58. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafur Rahim. So therefore, when you read this, Allah is saying that His mercy is unlimited and uncreated, unlike the mercy that He gave us. So the difference between the mercy of Allah and our mercy, Allah's mercy is uncreated. It's one of God's attribution. Unlike our mercy, it was created by God. It's a creation of God.
So so you're saying that Allah's mercy is created.
No.
Sorry, no, my apologies. No, you didn't. You didn't. Our mercy is created. Allah's mercy is not created. Okay, granted. That is a qualitative difference between the mercy of Allah and our mercy. But what is the mercy of Allah?
That's what I'm telling you. The mercy of Allah, Allah spoke about it in chapter 18, verse 58. Surah Al-Kahf, verse 58.
I see you 81. You'll be on soon. Surah 18, verse 58.
Yes, Surah Al-Kahf, verse 58. And
And
Allah
your
says
Lord
that
is
He's
the most
Ghafurur
forgiving,
Rahim.
the owner of mercy, were he to call them to account for what they have earned, then surely he would have hastened their punishment. But they have their appointed time, beyond which they will find no escape. So what is mercy then?
Excuse Bob, may I ask a question, please? So what's your
You can ask
point?
a question.
What
Yeah.
is your point out of all this? What's your point?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer your question because the whole show is about the point. You've just not been listening, Aladdin. So the whole point, and then I'm going to remove you so that 81 can come on. But you're more than welcome to join the back of the queue.
If you want me to go down, I'll go down. Then
no, that's fine. That's fine. So the whole point of this show is to demonstrate that Islamic theology, Islamic discourse about God, collapses into a nihilistic nothingness. That discussion about God, you might as well fill all the discussion about God with Allah is meh, blah, 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 Allah is blah, Allah is meh, Allah is blah. Because if you don't have a point of reference to say that Allah is merciful or that Allah is, forgiving, then, and we all know what those words mean in a natural sense, but if we don't have some kind of touchstone between God's transcendence and his otherness and our imminent experience of things like forgiveness and mercy, then language doesn't mean anything at all. Now, if we have that touch point, i.e. money being made in the image of God, then when we talk about Allah being merciful, God being forgiving, then we have some understanding of what those terms mean because we are made in his image. The other problem with it is if you say that Allah is a singularity, an absolute one, then the distinctions between Allah's qualities and his attributes merges into nothingness. Again, it merges into one, which means that you either end up talking Allah is blah and Allah is meh because, mercy and forgiveness are the same thing, or you end up saying, or you end up affirming a compound unity within the oneness of God, which obviously breaks the concept of Tawhid. So what I'm pointing out, Aladdin, is that Islam doesn't make rational sense. The Islamic theology is centered upon irrational contradiction, and that the answer to the contradictions that you find in Islam are actually found in Christian theology, and that's why I'm calling you and other Muslims to a better deen, Christian faith. Now I'm going to let you go, Aladdin. Feel free to join the back of the queue. You can come back on, and then I'm going to let 81 in. How are we doing, 81?
Oh yeah, good, thanks.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, the word rahma in Arabic comes from the root word that means the womb of the mother. Yeah. So when you look at that word in terms of that, when it says Allah is the merciful, what it's saying is that your existence, all of existence, depends on Allah. So He is the mercy. You see what I'm saying?
Just run by me again. Sorry.
The root word comes from the word is the womb of the mother. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So when you understand mercy in terms of that, what it's saying is that your existence depends on Allah, and the Rahim is that He gives to you out of His mercy. So He provides for you out of His mercy. Yeah. So He is the mercy, and He provides for you out of His mercy.
Okay, so my question to you, firstly, are you a Muslim yourself, sir? Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. That was an accident. Are you a Muslim yourself?
Yes.
Right. So what you've done there is perfectly describe what I said, which is that mercy is a transaction. That it is
what do we have to offer God?
One second. It's a transaction between two parties. And this is the problem with saying that Allah is eternally merciful. Because if you're saying that Allah is eternally merciful, then the transaction is happening when and where and with who. Now, we
I
are
said
also.
he is the mercy, not his. I said he is the mercy. We
So,
depend on him for our
so
existence.
is he also eternal?
Yeah.
Is he also the first?
Well, that's talking about it in terms of time. And
Thank you. That's my point. Is that you've got this problem within Islamic theology. You've got this problem. One second. 81. Please don't make me be rude and remove you. You've got this problem within Islamic theology, which is that if you are saying that Allah is an absolute singularity, then if you affirm, as lots of Muslims do, the idea that the 99 attributes and the many qualities of Allah, like his face, his hands, and his shin, and so on, if you're saying on one hand that these things are real things, distinguishable and different, then what you're describing there is a composite one, not an absolute monad or a singularity. If you're saying that if you're affirming the absolute oneness and singularity of Allah, then you're saying that all of these qualities are essentially the same.
Not really, because they're explaining things in relation to man, as we can understand them.
Which means that his mercy is dependent upon a transaction. Which means that when it says that Allah is all sufficient, which all sufficient means that there is no dependency upon another, then you've got a contradiction there, because you've got economy on one side and you've got the no need for an economy all sufficient on the other.
No,
because
because
you said that these descriptions are dependent upon time. You said that these descriptions are within the context of time. Agreed?
The first, I said, when you said the first, a better word I would say would be the originator.
Yeah. I agree. Like that I would agree that is a better translation. But my point to you is, mercy is a transaction. Would we agree?
Mercy between human beings, maybe, but what do we have to offer God?
So what does it mean? What does it mean? What is the mercy? What does it mean for Allah to be merciful?
Well, like I explained, we depend on, in relation to the word coming from the word about the womb, that
so
we
it's a transaction.
Depend on his existence. How is that a transaction? What are we giving?
Because we're not the one giving, we're the one receiving. That's the transaction.
But a transaction implies this to, there needs to be both parties are involved. All we do is receive.
Well, no, a transaction can be one way.
Yeah, all right. And if you're saying it's one way, then all right. Then.
Right, but that means that there is a transaction between the created and the creator, correct?
That we receive his mercy, that's correct, yeah.
Yes, so what does it mean to Allah to be merciful before creation?
We don't know what else is created.
And there is actually a transaction in the other direction, just to be clear. The transaction in the other direction in terms of Allah's mercy is that Allah forgives and he gives to us, and we give him praise and we receive from him.
But that's for our benefit as well.
Yeah, completely. I'm not denying any of that. I'm pointing out to you that you've got an inherent contradiction, because you're saying that Allah is merciful. That is a transaction, but a transaction means that there must be two parties, which means that if you're on one hand saying that Allah is merciful eternally, as Al-Din has said quite clearly, that it is an eternal quality of Allah, then to whom was he giving mercy before creation? Because it says, as we've already established, mercy is a transaction. You've agreed with that. Al-Din has already said that the mercy of Allah is eternal. So if it's eternally a transaction, who was the other party in that transaction?
What?
Exactly.
We are the other party.
So are we eternal?
Whatever other creation.
So are we eternal?
Has existence.
So are we eternal?
I don't know.
You don't know.
No.
So if you don't, bro, you've just said that Allah is the originator. If he is the originator, we can't be eternal.
Well, the whole thing about the judgment day and coming back is about, people about, things being eternal. I mean, our bodies in this life aren't eternal, no. Is our mind eternal? I don't know. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
the thing is, I would say, bro, that when a faith is self-contradictory, as Islam is self-contradictory, that should be a cue to you to find the exit.
I don't see the contradiction.
So let me spell it out. Let me spell out this contradiction for you again. Okay, Al-Din and other Muslims will affirm that Allah's mercy is eternal. Mercy is a transaction. That means that either there must be other eternal parties, there must be other things. Creation itself must be eternal for Allah to be eternally merciful, or Allah hasn't always been merciful, because there hasn't always been another party for there to be a transaction towards. Now, when you also add on to that the fact that it says that Allah is all sufficient, that means that he doesn't depend on anyone else for any of his attributes or qualities, then that means that you've got a contradiction, because one of eternal qualities is mercy. Go on, explain why not.
Because you're talking about it as if before there was time, but there weren't no time before that. As soon as he originated the existence, then he is the merciful. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. Then he is the merciful.
Yeah. So but before that, you know, there's no existence, is there?
So and that's my point, bro. That means that Allah wasn't always eternal. That means that Allah isn't merciful always, is he?
Does. Of course it does.
How? To who? To who is he merciful?
Well, you're talking about it in terms of time, though.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So if there wasn't
no,
time,
hold on 1 second. Sorry, I've misspoke there. I'm talking about it in terms of a transaction. I'm not talking about time. I'm talking about a transaction. You see, the transaction could be eternal, in which case my argument falls. If there is an eternal transaction, my argument collapses.
Well, the whole point about there being a judgment day and then an eternal life, that would suggest that it's eternal, isn't it?
But both of those things are created, which means they have a beginning.
Yeah, they have a beginning in what we know as creation, but God exists outside of that creation.
No, you're not hearing me. I'm talking about mercy as a transaction. I'm talking about it in terms of the transaction, not in terms of time. Forget the time thing. I'm talking about the transaction, and that's the nature of the contradiction. Anyway, 81. It was nice to have you on. I'm going to have to let you go because I'm going to start bringing this to a close. But it was nice to speak to you. I'm going to put my email into the chat. Do get in touch.
Okay.
So here's my email. So as you saw, guys, we've highlighted some problems. So let's just go over the problems again. Muslims assert two doctrines. One, that Allah is a singularity, a monad. Two, that Allah is not like anything that he has created. Those are the doctrines that they assert. When we look through Islamic literature, we find clear descriptions of Allah that tell us that there is plurality within this singularity, which contradicts the idea of the singularity. If we assert the singularity over the plurality, then it means that the descriptions of plurality become nonsense, they become meaningless. You know, the face is the shin is the hands are the eyes, in which case you might as well say meh or bleh, because what are you actually communicating? Which means that this is not clear guidance from Allah. It's actually very confused. If we say that Allah is completely other to anything that is created, whether that is connected to his idea of being a composite unity or whether him just being an absolute unity is irrelevant. If we just say that he is completely other to his creation, then when we talk about mercy and when we talk about his shin, his hands, his face, his eyes, then again, we might as well say meh or blech, because we're no more communicating anything when we say face, hand, shin, or mercy than we are by saying blah, blah, meh, bleh, bleh. we're not communicating anything. What's the solution? We Christians have similar things in our Bible. How do we deal with it? Well, firstly, we have a different concept of revelation to Muslims, because this confusion is literally God's own speech. We Christians don't have that concept. We Christians believe that the Spirit of God has inspired the men who wrote the Bible, who wrote in their own words, using their own intellect, grasping at the metaphors and the imagery in their own culture at their own time, to explain what God is doing in history, who God is, how God wants us to be. And we are able to make sense of that language because of two touchstones. Firstly, because that man is made in the image of God. And this gives us, just like my image that is appearing on your 2D screen, gives you an impression of who I am, or what I look like, rather, in this case. And the microphone coming over gives you an impression of what my voice sounds like. It is a capturing an image of something. It isn't the thing in itself. And so we are made in the image of God, not that we are God, but we are made in his image. And so we have that touchstone, that language by which we can speak about God's mercy or God's love or God's freedom of will or God's hatred or God's cherishing or God's morality. We have that image. But our second touchstone, and this is the one that I'm going to leave all of you with, is this one, which is, this is the Apostle Paul, our teacher, speaking about our Lord Jesus Christ. And he says this, speaking of our Lord Jesus Christ, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is also head of the body, the church, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything. For it was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, and through him to reconcile all things to himself, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Through him, I say, whether things on earth or things in heaven. So, guys, I'm afraid prayer, I'm closing it all down now, so I can't let you in. I apologize. Maybe next time. So, guys, this is the thought that I want to leave you with. Is if you like Dale Lee or Jason Bourne or Jim Bob or any of these kinds of people who want to challenge Christian theology, particularly people like Dale Lee, another troll who puts comments like this, because of him, Bob and Christians translate this verse because of using the Greek word dia, so everything was created because of Jesus to rule or inherit. They don't engage. We've sent out the link. We've invited them in. These people are not here for sincere conversation. These people, you should be aware, they're just here to troll. They're here to do dawah on the chat. So just be aware of that, guys. They're not sincere people. They're not sincerely looking for conversation. And when they have the opportunity to do so, they always run away. Because Dale could have come on. He's had the link. So is Jason. But if your belief system, as we've demonstrated in this show, has profound and inherent contradiction within it, that's a sign for you to look for the exit. Now, we as Christians, and I will be, doing shows in the future about the Trinity and stuff like that, because I know the comebacks. And the last 2 shows we talked about the incarnation, and we invited people to talk about the incarnation. But you know, like if your faith has an inherent contradiction, and it's saying it's literally the words of Allah, then that is a sign for you to look for the exit. And that exit, if you want to find the truth, is in Jesus Christ, who is the very image of the Father. When we look at Jesus, the human being, God, that person of Christ, we see what the invisible God, the Father, the transcendent, would look like in human form. We have a touchstone by which we can come to the Father in a meaningful way, because we have that great high priest who is our Lord Jesus Christ. God the Son entered into history. So guys, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. We'll be back at 7 tonight. We've got a great show. It is an ex-Muslim become Christian, a bit like Sam, but a different guy, and someone who was a Muslim. He was an English guy, became a Muslim. He's now a Christian again, and we're gonna talk to him tonight at 7 o'clock. So I will see you all then. Good night. God bless.